Wyoming Territory, 1887. The wind came hard off the hills the morning Quillan Vaughn rode up the dusty trail to the ranch he never knew he owned. He sat tall in the saddle, lean and sun-browned, with a telegram folded in his coat pocket and 30 miles of prairie behind him. His boots were cracked, his shirt damp with sweat, and the ranch, well, it looked like it had not seen a strong hand in years. The barn sagged on one side, the fence lines were half down, and the house leaned against the sky like it was tired of standing. Still, it was his now. Inherited from an uncle he had not seen since he was a boy. Quil had not planned on stopping long. He figured he would sell it, pocket whatever came of it, and move on. He had drifted too long to believe he belonged anywhere anymore. But then he saw them. 7 women, standing in a line outside the crooked porch, dust on their hems and sun in their eyes. All of them widows. All of them staring at him like they had been waiting for this very moment. And every single one of them held the same thing in their hand, a worn photograph of him. Quil froze halfway to the porch. What in God's name? The woman in front stepped forward. She was tall, with dark auburn hair braided down her back, eyes sharp as flint. She looked like she had not smiled in a while, but she held herself with strength, not sadness. "You are Quillan Vaughn?" she asked. "I am," he said slowly, dismounting. "And I am guessing this is going to take some explaining." She nodded, holding up the photo. "Then you better come inside." Inside the house was cooler, shadowed by thick curtains and the scent of wood smoke. The women gathered in the parlor, 7 of them, all different in age and manner, ranging from barely more than 18 to perhaps early 30s, but all with a quiet kind of grief in their eyes. The auburn-haired woman introduced herself first. "My name is Elira Vance. This ranch used to belong to your uncle, Uriah Vaughn. He ran something here. Something strange." "What kind of strange?" Elira's jaw tightened. "He took in war widows. Said he was helping us. Said he would see us safe and housed until we found new husbands. But he was not after charity. He made us all sign contracts. Promises. For land, for food, for safety in exchange. He said we owed him loyalty. And later, marriage." Quil's brows drew together. "But he was my uncle. He never mentioned any of this." "He never mentioned you either," Elira said. "Not until he died. Then suddenly, a new will appeared, leaving the land to you. And each of us. With this." She passed him the photo. It had been taken years ago, in Texas. He remembered the day he had been around 20, just back from the cattle drives, standing squinting in the sun. How his uncle had gotten hold of it, he had no idea. "They said we were to marry you," a younger blonde woman said softly, almost apologetic. "Or leave with nothing." Quil stared at them, stunned. "I did not ask for any of this." "We know," Elira said. "But we have nowhere else to go. Most of us lost everything in the war. Husbands, family, homes. Your uncle offered us a chance. Then he twisted it." Quil looked around the parlor. Some of the women studied the floor. Others watched him warily. "I am not marrying anyone I just met," he said firmly. "But I am not throwing out 7 women with nowhere to go. This land's big enough. You can stay until we sort this out." Elira's posture softened just a little. "That is all we ask." Quil nodded. "We start with repairs tomorrow. If this place is going to hold all of us, it needs fixing." They agreed. The women scattered through the house, some to the kitchen, others to the barn. Quil stepped outside to cool his head, staring at the hills rolling out beyond the horizon. He had expected a dead ranch. What he got was 7 lives tangled up in his. That night, he sat on the porch with Elira. The air was still warm, the stars clear overhead. "You talk like a man who has seen too much," she said quietly. "I have," Quil said. "And you carry yourself like someone who has had to start over too many times." "I have." They looked at each other, something unspoken settling between them. Nothing romantic yet, but something was there. Trust, maybe, or the start of it. "I will not lie to you," Quil said. "I do not know where this ends." Elira looked out over the dark fields. "Maybe it does not matter, as long as we end it together." He glanced sideways at her. "Is that what you want?" "I do not know yet," she said. "But I do not hate the idea." The wind stirred the grass. The house behind them held quiet voices, the creak of old wood, the smell of supper. Quil leaned back against the post, eyes on the stars, and for the first time in years, he did not feel like drifting. He felt like staying. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge when Quil stepped into the yard, sleeves rolled up and hat tugged low against the morning chill. The well pump groaned with rust when he worked the handle, but it gave up water clear enough to wash the sleep from his face. A hawk circled the far pasture, and somewhere behind the barn, a hammer struck wood in steady rhythm. He found Elira fitting new boards into the chicken coop, her braid tucked into the collar of a faded canvas jacket. She didn't glance up when he approached, only passed him a second hammer without a word. They worked like that for a while, side by side, saying nothing. The sky deepened to blue overhead. A chicken watched them suspiciously from the fence post. "Where'd you learn to build?" Quill asked eventually. "I lived through Georgia being burned to the ground," she said. "You pick up a few things." He nodded once, but didn't press. Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter of fact. After a while, she asked, "You ever run your own place before?" "I've worked cattle," he said. "Helped build line camps up through Montana. Never had to keep a house standing, though." "You'll learn." "I suppose I will." By noon they'd finished the coop, and he saw her hands were nicked in 3 places, the knuckles raw from splinters. He didn't mention it. She didn't favor them, so neither would he. At the house, Ruth, the oldest of the women, with graying hair pulled into a tight knot, was boiling beans over the stove. She gave him a look as he came in that said she'd already sized him up and filed him neatly into a category. He had no idea which. "You're tracking mud," she said, handing him a rag. "Appreciate the hospitality," he replied, wiping off his boots. In the back room, one of the younger women, Alice, was mending a saddle cinch with careful stitches. Her hands trembled slightly, but her concentration never wavered. When she noticed him watching, she smiled small, nervous. "You're not what I pictured," she said. "What did you picture?" "Someone older. Maybe meaner." "Sorry to disappoint." She looked down at her work. Not disappointed. He didn't know what to say to that, so he tipped his hat and moved on. Later, he asked Elira, "Why'd you stay, after your husband died?" She wiped her hands on her skirt. "There wasn't anywhere else. And your uncle made it sound like we'd be safe here. He said we could earn our keep. Said it'd be ours, in the end." I believed him. Did he ever? No. But he made sure we knew what would happen if we left. There was a family once. From Missouri. The wife said she'd had enough. Took her boy and went. They turned up 3 weeks later. No horses, no supplies. The boy had pneumonia. She never spoke again. Quill stared at the dust shifting on the floorboards. "I'm sorry. I'm not telling you this to get pity," she said. "I'm telling you because it's not just land we're living on. It's memory. And some of it's still raw." He met her gaze. "I won't be like him." "I don't believe you are." That night, they ate on the porch beans, cornbread, and a bit of dried apple sliced into tin plates. The wind was still, the sky streaked with smoldering orange. "I checked the barn," Quill said. "There's a pair of broken plows and a wagon axle that needs replacing. But the tacks sound. And there's 6 head of cattle still breathing." "Then we've got to start," Elira said. He watched her lean back, eyes closed for a moment like she was listening to something only she could hear. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "I did once," she said. "Then I realized I'd already survived the worst of it. And if I left, someone else might end up stuck where I'd been." He nodded slowly. "You protect the others." "They don't need me to fight for them," she said. "Just to remind them they're not alone." He looked at her hands, resting quiet on her lap. "You've done that." She didn't answer, but he saw her mouth soften slightly, like something in her had unclenched. When the porch lantern guttered low, he stood. "I'll ride out at first light. See if that well spring up the ridge's still running." "Be careful," she said. He hesitated, then added, "You ever need something, anything you tell me." "I will." As he walked back toward the bunkhouse, he glanced once over his shoulder. She was still sitting on the step, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the stars gather. Something in his chest shifted, quiet and certain. He wasn't going anywhere. The ridge was steeper than it looked from the porch. Quill's mare picked her way through the sagebrush, ears flicking toward the hush of the morning. He rode with a shovel tied to his saddle, a canteen slung over one shoulder, and a coil of hemp rope across the back of his saddle horn just in case the spring had run dry or worse, sunk in. By the time he reached the top, the sun was high enough to throw long shadows down the valley. He dismounted and followed the slope on foot, boots sliding in the loose gravel. He found the spring tucked beneath a fold of rock, trickling faint but steady into a shallow basin ringed with moss. The water smelled clean. He dipped a palm in and tasted it cool, sweet. It would do. He stayed a while longer, clearing brush, digging a shallow trench to guide the overflow toward a patch of low grass. Above him, a hawk passed again, gliding slow across the pale sky. The quiet wrapped around him like a blanket he hadn't realized he missed. When he returned, the yard was alive with movement. Two of the women, May and Dinah, were hauling burlap sacks from the cellar, their arms dusted with flour and ash. Ruth stood outside with her sleeves rolled up, sorting through a basket of dried beans with quick, efficient hands. In the paddock, Alice was brushing down the mule, her face shaded by a bonnet too large for her frame. Elira was near the back porch, hammering lengths of rawhide into a drying frame. She glanced up when she heard him, then returned to her work. "The spring's good," he said, stepping up beside her. "Enough flow to keep the cattle watered. I'll start laying pipe tomorrow." She nodded once, then tightened a strip of hide across the frame. "You've done more in 3 days than he did in 3 years. He watched the way her fingers moved, sure, and practiced. "You ever think about tanning full-time? When I was 12, I helped my brother skin a deer. He passed me the blade and said, 'If you can't stand the work, you won't last the winter.' So I learned." He crouched beside her, brushing grit from a length of frame. "He's still living?" "No." Union shell caught his chest at Cold Harbor. Quill didn't answer. He just handed her a second nail. Later, he found himself in the old tack shed, taking stock of what could be salvaged. The leather was mostly cracked, but the saddle tree was sound, and the bridles just needed re-oiling. He kept at it until the sun dipped low and the air turned cool again. That night, after supper, Elira lingered by the porch rail while the others drifted indoors. The lantern beside her cast a soft glow over one cheek, catching the faint line of a scar near her jaw. "You ever plan to settle before this?" she asked. He shook his head. "Didn't think I'd live long enough to bother." "What changed?" "Saw too many die with no one to bury them. Figured if I ever had the chance to stay put, I'd at least make it count." She leaned her arms on the rail. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? A man who'd see us as property. Or penance." "You're not either." She looked at him then, really looked. "You don't flinch when I speak plain. There's no point pretending." Something passed between them in the hush that followed, not a promise. Not yet, but the space where one might grow. He stepped down from the porch. "I'll start fencing the north pasture in the morning. With the spring running, it might hold more than 6 head if we can keep the predators out." "I'll help," she said. "You've done enough." "I'll help anyway." He glanced back once before turning in. She was still at the rail, arms folded, eyes on the hills. That night, he didn't dream of cattle trails or campfire smoke. He dreamt of her voice in the dark, steady and low, telling him the truth without apology. The south fence gave way before noon. Quill had been driving posts with a borrowed sledge, sweat streaking down his spine, when the bridle would split beneath the force of the strike. The rail tumbled loose, toppling into a patch of thistle and rabbit brush. He stood still for a moment, breathing hard, then leaned the hammer against his thigh and looked down the broken line. From the slope behind him, Elira's voice floated down. "You'll wear yourself out before you even get halfway." He turned his head slowly. She was on foot, her skirts tied up at the knees, a length of canvas bundled under one arm and a coil of wire slung over her shoulder. She stopped beside him, unwrapping the canvas to reveal a set of iron nails, a wedge, and a rasp. "I made a count of the rails we've got left," she said. "If you take the ones from the old goat pen, it'll stretch far enough to patch this side." He brushed a hand across his brow. "That pen's near collapse. That's what makes it expendable." She crouched by the broken rail and began measuring the length against a new one without waiting for his approval. He watched her work, the way she judged weight with her hands, how she pivoted to brace the board with her boot. He hadn't seen skill like that outside of trail crews, never from someone who carried herself with the same quiet steadiness, no matter who was watching. "Was your husband good with his hands?" he asked without thinking. She didn't pause. "He was a preacher. Knew more of scripture than tools. I had to learn the rest after." Quill drove the new post in silence. Dust rose in soft clouds around his boots. "You read the Bible much yourself?" "I used to," she said, "when I thought it might explain why men die and women are left behind." She passed him 2 more nails. "Now I only open it when someone's sick or scared." He tapped the nail in, then set the hammer down. "I've known men who held to it like water in the desert. Others who never opened it once and still lived honest." "Faith's not always belief," she said. "Sometimes it's just a way to keep going." The air shifted between them, not heavy, but full. They finished the fence before the sun tipped west. Elira wiped her palms on her apron and stood back to check the line. Quill stepped beside her, arms folded over the top rail, their sleeves brushing. "You ever miss Georgia?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Sometimes I dream of the scent of magnolia. But the place itself? No, it's not the same now. The people who made it home are gone." He nodded, slow. "I don't remember much of Texas. Just the heat, and how my uncle's boots sounded on the porch when he came home drunk." She looked at him full. "You didn't know him anything, Quill. I know that now." The wind stirred the grass beyond the fence, whispering through the cottonwoods. Back at the house, May was coaxing smoke from the stove, her face damp from the heat. The others had gathered near the root cellar, sorting through potatoes with split skins and eyes gone soft. The rhythm of the day settled into a quiet hum, task to task, word to word. That evening, Quill found Elira behind the barn, where the ground dropped away toward a shallow ravine. She stood facing the open dusk, arms crossed, her weight shifted onto one leg. "I've been thinking," he said as he stepped up beside her. "Dangerous habit," she replied, but her tone held warmth. "I want to make this place work. Not just for the cattle. For everyone here." She turned to him. "That's not pity talking. No. I've seen what happens to folks left behind. I'm not about to be the kind of man who lets that happen on his ground." Her gaze searched his face. "And after? When the land's mended and the herd strong?" He didn't hesitate. "Then I stay? If you'll have me." A breeze lifted her hair at the temples. She stepped closer, the space between them drawing tight. "You're not asking for an answer now?" "No. I'm asking for time. To show you I mean it." Elira reached out and laid her fingers against the back of his hand, her touch light, but sure. "That's the first thing you've said that made me believe you might stay." He turned his palm to meet hers. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. Behind them, the barn creaked in the wind, and the land stretched wide and quiet, waiting for whatever they built next. By the time spring reached the high grass, the ranch had begun to look like it belonged to the living again. The women moved through the days with purpose now, not caution. The fences held. The cattle grazed further out. Smoke rose from the chimney each morning, steady and sure, and the root cellar no longer held only what had been salvaged, but what had been grown. Quill built a new gate with his own hands, the wood planed clean, every hinge set firm. He didn't say much about it, but Elira noticed the way his palm lingered on the latch, as if it marked some quiet line between what had been and what might be. One afternoon, when the sky hung flat with distant rain and the wind carried the scent of turned earth, Elira rode out past the north ridge. She dismounted near the edge of the grazing field, where Quill stood with a ledger in one hand and a pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked up as she approached, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, dust streaked across his boots. "You keep track of every hoof now?" she asked. He offered her the ledger. "I've been trying to gauge how many we can keep fed through winter. If we trade early, we might afford a windmill." Elira opened the book, scanning the tidy columns. "You write like someone taught by a schoolmarm." "My mom was one. Before fever took her." She handed the ledger back, her fingers brushing his. "She taught you well then?" He didn't look away. "She also taught me to speak plain when something mattered." Elira's breath caught, but she didn't step back. "Does something matter now?" "I want to ask you something," he said, voice low. The wind shifted. A crow called from the fence line. Elira waited. "I want this place to be ours. Not just mine. Not just yours. Ours." She held his gaze, steady and quiet. "You're not asking out of duty?" "No," he said. "I'm asking because I trust you. Because I care for you. Because I've come to understand that building a life is different than surviving one. And I want to build, Elira, with you." She was silent a moment longer, not out of doubt, but from the weight of hearing something she had believed she'd never be offered again. Her fingers curled around his, sure and warm. "Then you ask, and I'll answer." He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. He just folded both her hands in his, and said, "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will." They married beneath the cottonwoods at the back of the pasture, where the light filtered gold and soft through the leaves. Ruth stitched Elira's dress from muslin saved over 2 winters. Dinah braided wildflowers into her hair. Quill wore his best shirt, the collar pressed stiff, the sleeves newly mended by Alice's careful hands. There was no preacher, but Ruth read from the book in her dry, steady voice. And when she finished, Quill and Elira turned toward one another without needing prompting. He placed a plain silver ring on her finger, bought weeks earlier in town, and she kissed him slow, her hand at his jaw, the hush of the afternoon bending around them like a vow. Afterward, they shared bread and boiled meat beneath the open sky. The others laughed and sang low songs from scattered corners of the country. Even Ruth smiled, her lined face soft with something close to pride. That night, when the lantern burned low in the room that was now theirs, Elira pressed her palm to Quill's chest, her head resting just beneath his collarbone. "I didn't think I'd love again," she said, voice almost a whisper. He turned toward her, drawing her in. "You didn't have to. I'd have waited." The wind brushed against the shutters. The house, once quiet with fear, now held the sound of breath shared and steady. Years passed. The ranch grew. They planted an orchard between the creek and the barn, and by the 5th spring, the peach trees bloomed pale and pink. Quill built a second bunkhouse for the hands they hired, and Alice, now grown into her own quiet strength, took charge of the books. Dinah taught letters to the children of nearby ranchers in a room Ruth helped furnish, and May tended the garden with a keenness that yielded full harvests. Elira and Quill walked the pasture each evening, hand in hand, their boots leaving parallel prints in the soft dirt. They spoke of the weather, of the cattle, of the way the world kept changing and how they had managed to stay steady through it. They grew older, but the love between them never lost its warmth. It deepened, rooted by the trials they had come through and the steadiness they had given one another. When they laughed, it was with ease. When they argued, it was with respect. And when they lay beside each other at night, it was with the comfort of having chosen, again and again, the same path, the same person. The land stayed theirs. The work remained hard. But the home they built was strong, and the life they led was honest. And they were never alone again.